Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be solving LeetCode 695, max area of island. Feel free to pause the video just to go ahead and read through the question so you get a better understanding of it. However, I'm just going to jump in and explain from the examples. Pretty much given a grid like this, where 1 represents land and combination of 1s represent islands, we have to traverse through this grid and figure out what land area, what island has the highest number of area, which is the biggest island. So just to kind of help us visualize this a little bit more, I'm just gonna take a snippet of it. So for instance, we're gonna traverse through this island. We're gonna come to this guy. I'm gonna let me use a color that can be seen better. See, red. Okay, good. So we're gonna traverse to this guy, and then we're gonna see this guy has 1, 2, 3, 4. He has 4. His land area is 4. Then we're gonna see this guy is 1. Okay, we're gonna dump him because 1 is less than 4. Then we're gonna go to this guy, see how many there is. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5. So we're gonna dump 4 because 5 is greater than 4. Again, we're just going through and picking wherever the highest is. Then we're gonna go to this guy. This is 4. We'll dump him because currently we already have 5, so 4 is smaller. So we dump him. We're gonna go through this guy. Still 4. 4 less than 5, we dump him. Then we're gonna come to this guy finally. Then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This guy is 6. We're gonna dump 5, and we're gonna return 6 as an output. This is pretty straightforward and very similar to our previous problem, where we were just gonna count the number of islands. Whenever I see a problem like this, what I think about first, as always, as first step we use Python. But when I see a problem like this, I think of a BFS algorithm, breadth first search, or DFS, depth first search. So let's go ahead and get started with coding, get our hands dirty, and see if we can figure this out. So first step, I typically like to do an error check just to make sure we're given a good grid to start with. So I'm gonna say if grid equal none, or grid or length of grid equal 0. Okay, what do we do? Just return 0. Means no area. So now this is our first check. Then our next check is we create a variable. I'm just gonna call him max area. This is to hold the maximum area we find. Okay, set him to 0. Obviously, since this is a grid, we're gonna need to traverse him somehow. I don't know if this is big enough for you guys to see. I think it is. So let me just make it slightly bigger. We're gonna need to traverse this grid somehow. Okay, obviously I think of nested for loops. So I'm gonna go for I in range length of grid. This is to traverse through the rows in this grid. Okay, and a nested for loop for j in range length of grid of I. Okay, this is to go through the columns, and the whole point of using I here rather than a constant, say 2, is because just in case we don't have a perfectly square grid, say in case this row is longer than this other rows, then I is gonna take care of it correctly for us. Okay, at this point we should now have access to each of the elements in our grid. So again, we care about 1s, we don't care about 0s. So I'm just gonna write a if statement just to get rid of the 0s and just focus on the 1s. So if grid of I j equal, keep in mind that this array, this grid, is made up of integers, not strings like our previous example of finding the number of islands. Okay, this is integers, not strings. So if grid equal 1, okay, then we want to do something. What do we want to do? We want to keep track of the maximum. And how do we do that? We're going to say max area. We're going to have to update this guy. Okay, he's going to be equal to the maximum between himself and the next b. So like I said, we're going to go through counting them. So it's going to be the maximum between the current max area and if we find a bigger guy, whoever it is. So in this case, we're going to use a function for that. So I'm just going to call it count area. Okay, and he's gonna take in the grid, gonna take in I, gonna take in J where we are on the grid. Okay, then once we're done with this, what do we want to do? We want to return max area because that's what we're being asked for. Okay, bam. So this is the first step in our solution. So next we're gonna have to create this count function that keeps track of the mass. This is actually the meat and potatoes of our code. Okay, so now I'm creating a function. As always, we like to do an error check at first, just to make sure we're not going out of bounds. So I'm gonna say if I is less than 0, okay, that's out of bounds because I has to start from 0, okay, or I is greater than or equal to length of grid. Okay, obviously I should never get over the length of the grid, right? Because it's this long. There's no other element outside the grid. Okay, or we do the exact same thing we just did, but for J. Okay, just to make sure we're in bounds for J. J again, in this case, it's not just the grid we're checking. We want to check the grid of each row. So we're just gonna say grid of I. Okay, and the last check, again, like we said earlier, we don't care about zeros, we only care about ones. So let's check if we're currently, grid of ij is currently on 0. Grid of ij equal 0. Okay, if this is the case, what do I want to do? I want to return 0. If any of this is true, we return 0. However, if none of this is true, what do we want to do? We want to initialize our count variable to 1. This is just going to count. So if this is not true, we know for sure we're not on a 0, right? So we know we're on a 1. So let's just start counting from wherever we are from 1. Okay, then as always, we're going to do a recursive function. We said it's DFS, right? A recursive function to keep track of where we are, but also just to make sure we don't visit the same grid twice, the same spot on the grid twice. I'm just going to go ahead and set that guy, grid of ij. I'm going to set him to 0 just to make sure we don't visit him twice. Okay, this should take care of that. So now we're going to increment our count if necessary, plus equals what we're gonna call this guy on himself. Okay, we're actually gonna do it 4 times again, because based on the problem statement, a body of land is considered an island if we can go downwards vertically, we can move vertically, or horizontally. We can't move diagonally. It doesn't count if we move diagonal. For instance, these two are separate because we're not allowed to traverse diagonally, so they're separate islands. Okay, so now we're gonna do I minus 1, I plus 1. Same for J negative 1, J positive 1. Okay, and in the end, we're just gonna return count. Okay, I believe this looks good. This looks correct. Let's go ahead and run the code and see what Python tells us, what LeetCode tells us. Okay, it says we've been accepted. Let's go ahead and submit it. Bam! This isn't bad. So we're faster than 74% of people, less memory than 7%. Not bad, I'm gonna take it. Also, keep in mind that this time we wrote this function outside of the class. However, we can move him to inside the class, just in case you want to do your code that way. Just write everything in the same class. It's definitely possible, it's doable, and I'm gonna show you guys how. Okay, Control Z, Shift tab, Shift tab. Okay, good. So now let's create the function inside of this class. Okay, I just copied and pasted them. Obviously, we have to pay attention to our indentations, right? So I'm just gonna go ahead and indent everybody. Okay. Bam, everything looks okay. However, if we have a function within a class, we always have to pass the keyword self, just to know we're saying, hey, look in this class for this function. Okay, and every time we call that function, we have to pass the keyword to, well, not pass it, we have to call self dot. This is what we have to call every time we call a function. So we're gonna have to do it everywhere, and also here. So bam, so I think this looks good. Let's go ahead and run it and see what's going on. Yep, it was accepted. Let's go ahead and submit it. Before we do, let's just make sure, let's try to compare performance just to see. Okay, let's go ahead and submit this guy. So now here's the difference in performance between writing the function inside of the class versus outside of the class. You can see it's a lot faster when it's written inside of the class, but not as fast when you write it outside of the class. Okay, and in terms of memory, it uses less memory when the function is outside of the class, but uses more when it's inside of the class. So that's it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. Feel free to tune in here daily. We post coding problems like this daily. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.